Log number 4.
Hey there, buddy. We're all jobs, eh?
Hi guys, we're back with another vlog, and this time I'm going to talk about forging your career in games. Not just for artists, but I think this will apply to any of you who are seeking a career in this industry. One thing I'd mentioned in the previous vlog was about gauging where your skills are at once you've picked the right school and pursuing that, and understanding the difference between what you love and being able to and working hard at it. I think another time I talked about how the talented people is a head start on the race, but it really comes down to still how hard you work. There's a caveat to that, okay? Obviously, some people are higher up than others, and the thing that really comes down to is being honest, evaluating yourself, where you're at and where you're headed. And that leads to my other point, where I find students have kind of lost sense of reality and expectation, okay? The bigger you dream, the more you have to be very sure of your skill set, your aspirations, and what you're willing to do and what you're willing to sacrifice. It's like the scenario, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or do you want to be a small fish in a large ocean? It really depends. Like I mentioned in the last vlog, even though I started off in games right off the bat as a concept artist, I prefaced that with it was a concept artist at a small fledgling company. It wasn't a concept artist at a big, renowned, respected company, okay? And so either way, you have to take steps towards your career and be willing to put your foot on the door and build your way up. So everyone that I know who is in the gaming industry, friends and peers and colleagues, we all started somewhere. I don't think I've ever run into anyone where right off the bat they got a high up position at a huge renowned company. We all had our experience in smaller companies, growing in that experience, growing in our skill set, and those were stepping stones to later positions and on the career pole. And so that's something that sometimes students don't realize, that you need to it takes time, and part of that is creating opportunities for yourself. What I mean by that is actually about being very willing and open to the opportunities that come your way. If you are young and you're starting out and you have these lofty goals about working at these upper echelon companies, BioWare or LucasArts or Naughty Dog or something like that, that's fine. But again, you have to be sure that you're taking the steps towards that, within a reasonable amount of time. You can't expect to be just out of school and like, I'm gonna get there right away. It happens, but for most of us, it doesn't happen that way. And you have to have a clear gauge. A good example is Olympics. When I was young and watching the Olympics, we just focus on obviously the upper echelon athletes, those who make medal standings or even top 10. And then we see these other athletes who will come in dead last or even out of 100. And when you're younger, you think, oh, that athlete's terrible. But obviously we've lost perspective of the bigger picture. An Olympic athlete comes in first or last. An Olympic caliber athlete, just to be an Olympian, says something about that person's ability, okay? And it's the same way when we are approaching our career and our ability and where we're looking at, So that's kind of also in reference to what I meant earlier about being a big fish in a small pond. In my case, like I said, it was working in a smaller company and gaining experience through that as they grew. For others, it could be a very entry-level position but at a larger company with larger projects, and then they work up their way in their experience and the career ladder that way. The only difference is the fact that they started at that same company, but in terms of where they're at experience-wise and caliber, it's the same. They're making their way up and taking steps towards that, whether it's in the same company or building blocks going through other companies along the way, like I had mentioned before, which was the case for me, and many of my friends were the same way. Again, when you're forging this career, you have to be very realistic about your expectations and not to be alone in what you're thinking. Talk to others that you can get an honest and opinion and evaluation from. If you're just showing your work to mom, well, mom's gonna love it no matter what you do, but it doesn't mean companies are gonna love it. So it's always good to surround yourself, whether it's with your peers or teachers or whoever, that can help you honestly assess where your work is at and where you need to be. And this gives you a good gauge and gives you good practice even for yourself in where your expectations are. And speaking of expectations and priorities, they change, right? So when I said earlier about creating opportunities yourself and being willing, so one way is to say I'm willing to work at whatever company will have me, not only in the city but in the province or state, wherever you're from, or even across the nation or even beyond. And that's just opening up opportunities and the doors for yourself, as opposed to just saying I'm going to only shoot for these two companies. Then you're closing doors right away for yourself. So along the way, in doing so, you develop this kind of appreciation for where you're at and where you're headed and what you're willing to sacrifice, because your priorities change in life. For me, I'm from the West Coast. I came to the East Coast for school, went back to the West Coast to try a little bit of other things, and that's when I finally started to dabble in animation a little bit. And then I went to New Jersey, like I mentioned before, for art school. Then I went back to the West Coast to work in animation for a year. Then I came to Toronto and moved here. And I was able to do that because, my situation. I was willing, and I was young, and I was single, and I was mobile. But after working at Pseudo for 7 years or so, and eventually they shut their doors, priorities and situation change, right? At that point, I was already married, had a mortgage to pay, planning for a family and for children. I can't just pick up and go as I please like I did before. I have to consider my wife and her needs, and just in general, our priorities had changed because it was important for us to be with family, and our families are here in Ontario now. And along the same lines is that, for me, if I wanted the same job, the option or knee-jerk reaction would have been to seek that job anywhere. And if I had done that route, it would have been at another city, because at the time Toronto didn't really have a lot of game developers, at least certainly not very large ones going on. But if I had done that, that's trading one problem for another. First and foremost, even if I got the job, that means now my wife would be the one who's out of a job, and would have to start all over in terms of her career. And on top of that, we'd be away from family, which is not something that we wanted. Other priorities for myself were, I have the church that I serve out here is important to me, that my commitment to them. So again, family and responsibilities and all those kind of things help kind of change where your priorities are at. Whereas, like I mentioned before, when I was younger, I was able to move around because I could, and that's what I wanted at the time. The other thing is, even after that, I was freelancing, and so it's been about 6 years or so, and that's even changed along the way. At the beginning, I was willing to kind of network and try to get all these big projects, and even after my first child came along, I was burning the candle at both ends and losing some sleep sometimes. But as time went by, and especially after our second child came, I just did not have the energy or even desire to do that. And so that's how I kind of came into teaching, and I enjoy it for one as well. But also, on a practical level, it adds a little more stability to income. It also frees me up to be selective about what projects I want to take on for freelancing. But also, the other thing is my desire to work on my own personal projects. And so, those are something that's, these priorities and the things that you may have would be changing along the way, okay? But, so something has to be sacrificed at different stages, okay? And the earlier that you realize that and are willing to do whatever it takes in order to achieve that, then the better off you'll be. And so again, it's not to say not to have these big dreams, but just remember what you need to be willing to do and what you need to be willing to sacrifice. Again, I think that's the biggest thing I see, especially with young people, is they have these aspirations and dreams, but not perhaps a good gauge of reality and expectation and where they're at and where they're headed. When you're forging your career, be willing to take on whatever opportunities come your way, and don't be too proud to only pick the cream of the crop. As the higher you set your goals in that regard, there's more competition there. It doesn't mean you can't shoot for that, but there's a time and place for those things, okay? And assess what you want to do and what really is your whole objective and where you want to be. So I hope that helps a little bit. And again, don't be isolated. Talk to your peers, talk to professionals, talk to your teachers. Those will help you give a clearer perspective and a reality check of your expectations, what you need to do and honestly, really, how you can achieve those goals in a way that's realistic and pragmatic, but at the same time something to aspire to. So I hope that helps, and stay tuned for another vlog. Peace.
Don't forget to subscribe.